Welcome classic rock fans to an episode of Classic Album Review, where classic albums are excavated and explored. And today we're looking at David Gilmour's Rattle That Lock. This album is replete with that ethereal guitar work and spacey riffs we'd come to expect from a David Gilmour album, as he muses quite tenderly upon the idea of mortality, grief and remembrance. And these themes luxuriate amid the wailing bends and the climactic crescendos of the music on this record. The production is crisp, sharp, brittle even, suggesting a fragility which links it sonically to a lot of the ideas that are touched upon. On this album we get smoky jazz lounge inflections and as well as the title track, of course, alluding to that celestial bust-up which in itself becomes a meditation on the nature of rebellion. There was something peaceful and expansive about this record as these ideas are explored in unfolding waves of sound, like an oceanic expanse of time, if you like. And its deep, compelling tones and textures all adds to an atmosphere of melancholic reflection. It has to be said that Gilmour gets a lot of criticism for being too lightweight, conceptually modest, just not Floyd enough. And Waters also, his lyrics may contain that edginess, that conceptual bite, all megaphone and snarl, but it often lacks the warmth and musical orthodoxy, is a phrase I like to use, that David Gilmour brought to that particular table. I suppose the lesson here is that these individuals are not Pink Floyd. This band were a combination of four individuals that brought something very specific to the sound and ideas behind that band. Therefore, it's perhaps a little bit unfair to compare their solo offerings to those classic 70s Floyd records. The live dates that followed the release of this record was described by Gilmour as an old man's tour. And the same could be said of this record. This record, it reflects a lot on the inevitability of loss and those long goodbyes, of course, as our lives march on. And the wistful melancholy of these sentiments are articulated beautifully within the shades and tones of the music. There are plenty of ambient stretches and ethereal solos, to quote Paul Simon, to keep the customer satisfied. This album is a bit of a mishmash in terms of all its sources and influences, but it's not without beauty, far from it. It's a strange sonic stew in which we get I believe railway announcements, the piano stylings of his own son, believe it or not, the aforementioned jazz lounge affectations, and of course those wonderful Miltonic references which I enjoy. Many of the songs on this record has its own unique beauty, and in some ways I mean that as a criticism as well. I would have much preferred to see these songs connected by a thematic thread, perhaps a collection of songs that explore the very nature of grief and loss, rather than just being a jumble of assorted tracks, a kind of sonic jamboree, if you like. In terms of Gilmour's solo output, I never took to On an Island. It's perhaps an album that I need to listen to again, I believe, revisit that one. But I really like the hard-edge rock sound of that first solo album from 1978, I believe. I even like the high sheen of About Face, an album that I bought the day it came out on vinyl. But even the more sedate tones of his later releases are intriguing, interesting, and quite immersive, I think. And of course this album, remember, follows hard upon the release of Pink Floyd's Endless River, a requiem to the late Richard Wright. And those ideas and atmospheres are explored and carried over to this record. But this record is slightly different as it looks at the very nature of grief and letting go, as well as musing on the inevitability of Gilmour's own passing one day, contained beautifully in the metaphor, of course, a boat lies waiting. If Waters can be hailed as the conceptual genius behind those classic 1970s Floyd albums, Gilmour is the architect of those sweeping soundscapes which defines that essential Pink Floyd sound. Not in any way to underplay the contribution of Richard Wright and Nick Mason. We still get those textures on this record, but they're broader brushstrokes, shorter songs, certainly shorter than those sonic forays of that silly pop band, as Dave Gilmour calls it. They are nonetheless beautiful musical elegiac musings accompanying Polly Sampson's lyrics. There is a sense on this record of one looking back. We get the autumnal Faces of Stone, of course, which is not only a song about his own mother, but it's a meditation on age. There is also lighter moments, what one critic has described as the jazz confection of The Girl in the Yellow Dress, and the instrumental finale, and then just leaving a melancholic ache in its trail as it just fades away. We get what we pay for with this album, and what we'd expect from a David Gilmour record. You know, we get those wonderful spatial explorations of sound, or as I think Rolling Stone described it, those picturesque ivy interludes of guitar noodlings. And this album's 3 instrumental pieces are some of the best musical interludes I've heard from Gilmour. 5am, Beauty, and then these are transcendent pieces as far as I'm concerned. This is the rapturous effect that I think David Gilmour's playing has upon me when I listen to it now. Yes, it's true that Polly Sampson wrote most of the lyrics, if not all the lyrics on this album, but one critic has pointed out that she is the mere interpreter of David Gilmour's musical moods. And those moods have moments of devastating profundity, not only in the eulogy to Richard Wright, but a wider musing on mortality and loss. According to Wikipedia, most of this album was recorded at Medina Studio in Hove. I hope I've said that right. The additional recordings was at the Astoria Houseboat Studio with longtime collaborator and engineer Andy Jackson. David Stansby is responsible for the artwork, but the artwork, which is excellent by the way, was produced under the direction of Aubrey Powell, I believe, giving it that much yearned for Floyd connection. I'd like to talk about each track individually on this album. It starts, of course, with 5am, which is a lovely piece, complemented by that trademark Gilmour guitar work. It starts off with an ambient swell of keyboards, perhaps reminiscent of Shine On You Crazy Diamond a little bit, perhaps making this sonically all fitting into a eulogy to a fallen band member. This eerie beginning with its emerging dawn overture, of course comprising of Birdsong and Gilmour's sublime guitar phrasings. It's a narrative of the day unfolding. The Birdsong just reminds me of seeing Pink Floyd live when they would start their concerts an hour or so before they came on stage with just the sound of birds singing. It was just wonderful. The guitar articulates a sense of an awakening, I think befitting the song's title, of course. And we get the gentle stabbing sounds of the keyboards, which beautifully support the drawn-out ethereal whimsy of Gilmour's playing. Rattle That Lock, of course, the title track, has a nice bluesy swing to it, with backing vocals provided by Misha Paris, beautifully, I think, accompanying the fragility of Gilmour's voice at this point. It's a song about rebellion, I think personal rebellion rather than actual political revolution. That Miltonic motif of Satan, the most beautiful angel who rebels against God and is subsequently cast downwards. I think what we can take from this song is the idea that we need to keep the spirit alive within us. And Gilmour's voice on this one is in itself rebelling against those restraints imposed upon it by age, often hovering within the upper registers of his range, but still sounding magnificent, by the way. Faces of Stone is a devastatingly beautiful number, one of the best tracks on the album. I love the way those opening piano notes just hang there, allowing the listener's heart to swell as it moves into almost the last waltz through time and memory. There is a feeling of looking back with this one, with lots of references to autumnal leaves. I love the opening acoustic strumming. It reminds me a little bit of Murder from the About Face album. It also has a lot of continental textures. I often wonder if Gilmour is referencing his time in France with his family, perhaps, but I'm just reaching there, maybe. A Boat Lies Waiting is a wonderful canvas of sound in tribute to Richard Wright. I Was Lost on an Ocean, Gilmour sings, and this piece, of course, is constructed around the central metaphor of a journey to the eternal, of course. And we get these textures explored, these wonderful Floyd motifs. I love the sustain on the guitar which accompanies the lovely piano phrasings, which are reminiscent of Richard Wright's Violent sequence, which later became Us and Them. I'm Rolling Right Behind You, Gilmour sings. We get this meditation perhaps on his own mortality, which is accompanied by the sighing harmonies of David Crosby and Graham Nash. The voices are plaintive and breathy on this one. I love the fact you get Wright's voice at the beginning of this. For some reason this reminds me of Great Gig in the Sky. Great Gig in the Sky, of course, is a track that reflects upon death in a general sense and abstract, whereas this one deals with death in a very specific and literal sense. Dancing Right in Front of Me has been described as an amorously sincere funk waltz with that lovely deep guitar motif. Reminds me a little bit of that early Pink Floyd number, Red Queen. I think it's an outtake from Zabriskie Point, I could be mistaken there. Lovely jazz flourishes on the piano as well. In Any Tongue. I love the eerie whistling sound on this. Sorrow tastes the same on any tongue. I mean, what a great line that is. The sombre piano chords are excellent, accompanied by that tattoo drum sound. Very moving, atmospheric number. And that image, that metonymic reduction represented in the pair of boots, it just has such poignant significance. That the anguished wail of the guitar at the end, of course, is just so Gilmour. And we get beauty, of course. Gilmour's playing is just so eloquent here in these shimmering arcs of treble. It has a very eerie beginning as well, which is kind of links it to 5 a.m. Somebody, I think one critic said it reminds him of something from a Sergio Leone western. Girl in the Yellow Dress is not a song I'm particularly keen on. Interesting narrative, and has, as I said, it has that smoky jazz lounge feel to it. Today is another interesting one as well. It has an energy, I think, that recalls Gilmour's past. As I said with this album, there's an idea of constantly looking back. And then there's a gorgeous instrumental piece, reminiscent perhaps of something that wouldn't be out of place on the Momentary Lapse of Reason album. It's a whimsical and evocative piece that has a finality to it. I love that finger-picked nylon guitar at the end, which just fades out. It's like a musical motif that very much captures the spirit of this record. This album has grown on me over time with its delicate crystalline tones and luxurious instrumental passages, not to mention the exploration of some very profound and moving themes. This album, of course, is the product of an older, more sedate Gilmour. We can just see him now in his Panama hat, looking more like the man from Del Monte than a prog god. Anyway, that's my review of David Gilmour's Rattle That Lock. I'd like to say thank you for watching and ask you to click like, subscribe and check that bell so you get notified of any future uploads. And if you appreciate the work that goes into these reviews, do take a moment to check the links below this video for ways you can support me. It's always much appreciated. Anyway, it just leaves me to say I hope you're all staying safe, and more importantly, please do keep listening.